chicken and egg problem, right? That most cars can't actually burn alternative fuels, whether it be ethanol, butanol, methanol, whatever it is. And, you know, and it's actually pretty simple to change. I mean, they make flexible fuel vehicles today, and it's just $100 per car. But I'm wondering whether, you know, on the side of subsidies versus regulation, whether we can eliminate subsidies to levelize the playing field, but we can maybe do a little regulation so that everyone's cars has the flexibility when gas prices go up to $4 a gallon to be able to burn other types of fuel.
I think the possibility exists. We are having a difficult time even introducing the electric platform in a way that there's consumer appeal to it. And what you probably don't want to do is try to create a market through regulation with a product in America that nobody wants to buy. I mean, that's the best way to go back to talking about bailout of the three bigs. Part of implementation of new technology means that the marketplace has to want it. And, you know, I talked to ethanol folks today about butanol. And they sort of look at me like, what? But, you know, that's got greater promise, I think, than the ethanol blends that are out in the marketplace. We're limited to some degree in our country by the distribution network that is currently set up and the lack of willingness by those to set up additional alternative fuels at those outlets. That's why I think it's absolutely so crucial that we adopt some portion, if not all, of Boone Pickens' plan for the heavy trucks. I think that for the first time will unleash the distribution network in America to accept additional fuels, and I see that as just the start. That's why I believe natural gas is the best place to go first, and then challenge technology long term. I think I could make the long-term case that because of the agricultural capabilities of the United States, that it's biodiesel that's probably a bigger alternative for us long-term with few downside consequences, where this quest for ethanol, I think, is very dangerous, and I'm speaking purely as a personal observation. We're taking a lot of farmland that we're devoting to ethanol production, where we're growing a corn that nobody can eat because of the sugar content that's only good for ethanol production at a time where the world's #1 need is food. And this is very, very scary to me, and I think if you just look at commodity pricing right now, you'll already see the effects that that transition over to ethanol-produced corn has had on other agricultural products pricing. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. One restriction that we had from the late 30s, which I think was instigated by the oil industry, was the criminalization of hemp. Now, hemp is not marijuana. That's propaganda. Hemp is a renewable source. It can be used for biofuels. The cellulose content of it is good for the soil. It replenishes the soil. It also, as a food product, is a complete protein with essential fatty acids. It can be made for fibers. It could reduce the use of cotton as an agricultural product, which is highly needed. The pesticides needed for cotton are very high. What can you see as the possibility to decriminalize hemp and give our farmers opportunities to not only have a renewable crop, but something that can be produced biofuels and good food source?
Well, as you know, some hemp production has been decriminalized, and it's used in particular things. From a standpoint of an alternative fuel, until the enzyme combination has been found, we just can't do cellulosic ethanol in a productive way, and we would need that enzyme combination to be able to do hemp just like wood chips. And eventually, whether it's a North Carolina company that's Danish, I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. It's awful to get old, isn't it? You know, I can't profess to be as old as Roscoe, but I think his memory is better than mine. But we've got companies that are chasing that combination of enzymes, and they'll break it at some point. And let me assure you that cellulosic ethanol will play a part of that D, all the above. I'm not sure that there's any 800-pound gorilla that's in that basket. And let me just say this. We could turn today and say our policy is going to be, we're going to go to wind and solar and all of the alternatives. Right now, with where technology is, we could transfer about 12% of our energy needs in the country. Well, let me tell you the hard, cold facts of that. We're still relying on the Middle East. And so that's a short-term tool. It's not a long-term solution. And I think what we've got to be focused on is long-term solutions. I don't exempt hemp in that basket of alternatives in the future if the technology allows us to use that as an alternative fuel. Yes, ma'am.
We quoted Thomas Jefferson, and I have a quote from his Notes on Religion in 1776, where he said, "Stop Islamic immigration, deport non-citizen Muslims from this country." Article 6 of the Constitution indicates that there will never be another government with more say than the Constitution, but the CFIUSM, the Committee on Foreign Investment, has allowed initiatives to change many of the financial situations that allow Sharia-compliant deals to control the distribution and control all that you're talking about with the oil industry. Why can there not be an investigation done through the Senate to find out where they, as foreign agents, are not completely compliant with the IRS and many other rulings in this nation, and start to oust them that way and take their hand off of the noose around our neck that are preventing so much of our ability to control the economic situation with our fuel and everything else you're talking about?
Sure. Let me just say, anywhere that Sharia law might be recognized even remotely in the United States should be constitutionally challenged, because it shouldn't exist. And there have been some communities that through resolutions have acknowledged even the existence of it, and I think that's wrong. And I think it's dangerous long term. From a standpoint of the deportation of Muslims, I mean, if you take it literally, that's not America.
I'm not going in that.
Yeah, but I'm just,
Address their illegal action with distribution.
we should investigate anybody's illegal action. And I think that part of our patchwork of policies that exist today exist out of a need. I mean, we've changed policies because we needed Middle Eastern oil. We've turned our heads and said, geez, we're against real beneficial tax credits that aren't fairly applied. But when you look at our tax code, I mean, it's overwhelmingly supportive of oil companies. And I happen to be one in favor of tax simplification on a corporate and individual level. I would like 3 flat rates for individuals. I would like 1 flat rate for corporations. And you know what? When you do it, you eliminate the advantage that oil companies have got. So, that's part of the times. And I think we benefit in the long term more from that. And you know what? We start establishing a real market-based price for the product. It gets back to what I said, predictable, sustainable energy cost into the future. As long as you've got subsidies that are involved in it, then we're susceptible to that. Nothing would please me more than for the world to have to thumb their nose at the Middle East and their resource in the ground. I would love to see it go from $100 a barrel to 1 cent, and nobody want it for that price. It will not happen if what Roscoe said doesn't happen. There's a collaborative international effort to try to relieve ourselves of our addiction to petroleum. I think I'm getting ready to get the hook, am I? Last one.
Thanks, Senator. With the legislation you're developing with Senator Chambliss, what's your take on the seems to be a vast potential for offshore wind
Listen, if we don't exclude anything from the basket of renewables. The only requirement will be that the marketplace has to judge that it's cost effective, that it's not propped up artificially, and I think that's a fair way to do it. I think there are ways to look at the implementation of new technologies and say it's appropriate for the federal government potentially to leverage the development, but not to subsidize its use. I think there's a big distinction between the two. And like I say, even with full deployment, wind can play a role. It's not the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's more appropriate in some places than others. We still haven't figured out the transmission challenges of offshore generation and integration into the grid. And we certainly haven't figured out with an advanced grid how we handle the security of that grid, which is another aspect of stuff we have to deal with that I don't necessarily expect America to be bogged down day to day with, but there are many days I'm bogged down with it up here trying to figure out how to make sure the reliability requirement that we have and that every utility has is protected. Let me end with this if I can, and it's really the words of George Bush Sr., the old guy. In 1988, he was sworn in as the 41st president. And incorporated in his inaugural address, he said this: "We're not the sum of our possessions. They're not the measure of our lives. In our hearts, we know what matters. We cannot hope only to leave our children a bigger car or a bigger bank account. We must hope to give them a sense of what it means to be a loyal friend, a loving parent, a citizen who leaves his home, his neighborhood, and his town better than he found it." For all you've heard from Roscoe, from me, from Boyden, from Lindsay, I remember the list. I don't know in which sequence you've heard. Do understand that when each of us wakes up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you don't see the federal government or state government or local government. You're looking at the person who can most affect change in the communities you live in. For the contribution that you make, I'm here to say thank you. But we also need to get that word out to the American people. You know, I think the one thing we take for granted sometimes is America's greatness. And to some in the room, when I say that, you might think, well, we're the #1 economy in the world. To others who served in war force, you might think, well, we've got the strongest military in the world. I like to use de Tocqueville. When de Tocqueville came to the United States, he talked about the United States and its greatness. He talked about a land where people gave of their time and their resources to those who were less fortunate without even thinking about it. And that was what was so great about America. Well, you know, there's some things like entrepreneurship that are genetically passed from one generation to the other. De Tocqueville's understanding of greatness is not something in our DNA. It's not something that passes genetically. It's something we have to make a conscious effort to educate every generation about what makes this country great. So it's our responsibility not only to give back to our communities, it's our responsibility to take on the task of educating the next generation what the true definition of greatness of America should be. Thank you very much.